Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Talking Tours. My name is Mark Baylor. I'm product manager here at Limelight Arts Travel, and I'm joined by Helen Pope. Before we begin, just in the spirit of the land, I'll read a welcome to country. It's in the spirit of reconciliation. Limelight Arts Travel acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So once again, welcome everyone. Hello, Helen, how are you today?
Hello, Mark. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. On a slightly chilly spring day in Sydney. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming to you from Rome, which has been my home for the last 45 years, and it's a beautiful autumnal day here.
Okay, wonderful. Rome with all that history. And you say you've lived there for many years. Why did you want to move to Rome on a permanent basis?
Well, I actually fell totally in love with ancient Rome and with Latin when I was 11 years old and studying Latin at school in Ballarat, and it was just the whole world of ancient Rome was such a wonderful discovery to me. Quite different from Ballarat, of course. And I was just totally enchanted, enamored by the idea of this ancient civilization, which had so much, which had great architecture, which had great art, which had fantastic literature, which had sophisticated political system. And literally, I was 11 years old when I decided that when I grew up, I was going to go and live in Rome where the ancient Romans were. And so I did that, as I say, 45 years ago, and I've moved. I haven't moved from the ancient Romans; they're always my first interest. But of course, living in Italy, I have discovered so much more. It's such an extraordinarily rich country, and they say in Rome, "Non basta una vita," a lifetime is not enough to get to know Rome, and there's certainly still much more of Rome and of Italy that I have yet to discover after my 45 years.
Certainly a long way from Ballarat, but
it is indeed.
I guess having a love of Latin and then living in Rome and seeing all that history in the past, and that sort of your love of classics as well, I believe, would sort of suit you there as well.
It's been a remarkable voyage, I must say, since I first came to Italy, and I just feel I've learned so much. And in fact, I'm very grateful to the classics because, first of all, they brought me to Rome, of course, but then the more I understood about the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks, the more they took me around the Mediterranean. They introduced me to countries all around the Mediterranean, which was a wonderful discovery, and just following them around the empire was one of the great joys. Just discovering other countries and discovering the Romans or the Greeks there, and discovering more about those countries. It's been a wonderful journey through classics.
Yeah, it's just such a great marriage, isn't it? The two together, and how that's informed your travels.
Yes, it has indeed. It's been very, very important for my travels.
And you've been to some wonderful, some people might say weird places. Tell us about some of the places you've traveled throughout your life and
Well,
career.
I do. I absolutely love traveling, and I think one starts off with the regular places, and then you discover other places. And I think I became very interested in going to places, some that had a bad reputation, just to see what they were like, and to get a personal view of them, to understand. Yes, I have been to Yemen a couple of times.
Wow.
I went there first at the end of the 80s, I think. And that it wasn't quite classics that took me there, except the Romans did go to Yemen. They went to Yemen in the first century. And they called the area Arabia Felix. That name comes from the Romans who went there. And Yemen was just extraordinary. Of course, there weren't many tourists then. I'm very glad that I went there. Going to a city like Sana'a, when you go through the gate, and it's like no other experience you've ever had. It's just totally magical with this wonderful architecture and the beautiful painted windows. And the moment the south of Yemen opened up, I went back then because it hadn't been open when I went the first time. I went back immediately. The south opened up. You're afraid of losing opportunities according to political situations. So I went back to Yemen the second time and explored the south, which again was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the architecture is unique in the world, and every city and every town in Yemen has a different kind of architecture. That was absolutely fascinating.
Wow.
I've been to Turkmenistan, which is one of the bad countries, but that was in pursuit of the classics. That was to follow up on a story from Plutarch about the Parthians after they had defeated the Romans in Turkey, in fact, in the Battle of Carrhae, and it was said that the head of Crassus, the Roman general, was given to the Parthian king, and he was in his capital, which happened probably to be just outside of Ashgabat, the capital of Turkmenistan, and he was watching Euripides' Bacchae at the time, and it just gives a new perspective on the Parthians. They weren't these sort of primitive people going around sacking and looting, but they were, they were looking at Euripides' plays. That was wonderful. I've been to Iran 11 times now because
Wow.
Iran seems to me a bit like Italy and Turkey, that it is just immensely rich in its history and its culture, for thousands of years. So that you just get these layers and layers and layers of absolutely fascinating works, cultures right throughout. So it's like these places. One visit isn't enough. You keep going back because you find there's always so much more to discover. And Iran has not a good reputation, but it would be hard to find any country in the world where the people are so generous, warm, and hospitable. And it would be hard to find a country, well, apart. It's one of the countries that is just dense in its cultural history. It's wonderful. I've been to a lot of the Arab world around the Mediterranean. I was very fortunate to have a year sabbatical in Syria. I think I had been to Syria and just been fascinated by the Roman sites that I'd seen there. And I read a wonderful book written by an Australian called Rome in the East. And of course, when I studied ancient history at university, at Monash University, Roman history was about Rome and Greek history was about Athens, and you didn't sort of move outside those two places. And then the discovery that Rome was all through the East, and Athens, of course, was all through the East, all through Turkey, Asia Minor. Um, Reading Rome in the East was very influential for me, and that's when I decided I'd go and spend a year in Syria, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I was very lucky, of course, to go there when I did. So those are just some of the places, but yeah, across North Africa, around the Mediterranean.
So definitely discovering the Roman world through
Yes,
different
yes.
places that, yeah.
Yes, and just discovering how far the Romans went. And you think, you go out to the airport and you get on a plane and you fly off to some far place. And then you think, well, the Romans went there by foot and by ship. And they were extraordinary travelers. And it wasn't just the armies that traveled. They took wives and kids with them. There were a whole mass of people who were traveling. And they were tourists as well. I mean, the Romans
Mm.
the Romans were tourists as well. They went to look at things in Egypt. They went to Troy. They went to look at Troy, places like that. So yeah, the travel in the ancient world really strikes me as being fascinating.
So I guess that does bring us to Turkey. You mentioned Troy, and
Yes.
you're leading a tour for us, Limelight Arts Travel in
Yes,
March.
I am
Yeah.
indeed. I think Turkey is one of those countries that I say, like Italy and Iran, that is just so rich in
Mm.
its history and just over thousands and thousands of years. I took a group to Turkey a couple of years ago. We went to the site of Göbekli Tepe, which is now famous as having, have a civilization of 10,000 years, and that it much thousands of years older than the pyramids in Egypt. And Turkey again just has those layers and layers and layers of different civilizations. It's extremely rich. I went there the first time in the 1980s, early 1980s, and that was a time when Turkey was still considered a little bit off the tourist track. Now, of course, it's a major tourist destination.
Mm.
And so that's changed a lot. But I remember that first visit, I was just so, I was so amazed by what I saw. Istanbul, Troy, other places. I was just so amazed I couldn't wait for the next holidays so I could go back to Turkey. And then I went back every year for a month each year after year after
Wow.
year, just to discover more, because it's a big country and it is so rich and so varied, I think, in what it has to offer.
And I guess it's one of those romantic destinations that was sort of brought to life through Agatha Christie's novel writing, sitting up there. And I know she has a room dedicated to her. I've been in it in the Pera Palace Hotel in Istanbul.
Ah, yes.
Yes, we can go and visit, actually. We can do that on the tour when we're
Absolutely
staying there.
wonderful.
But I believe it's one of your favorite hotels.
Well, I have never had the privilege of staying in the hotel. I've been to the hotel. I've had the tea and cakes in the
Mhm.
hotel. And I just couldn't think of a more perfect way to begin this tour than by staying in the Pera Palace, because it's the hotel. It's the hotel there that has the history, that has the romance, that has the exotic aspect, I think, of entering a new world. And as you know, of course, the hotel was built to accommodate the passengers on the Orient Express at the end of the 19th century. And I think, on the outside, it's a neoclassical facade, and you go through that. And once you go through that, you enter into this extraordinarily exotic world of Oriental Art Nouveau. It's just exotic, and it takes you into a different world. And I think it's very, very evocative. I mean, yes, Agatha Christie, her Room 411, I think it is,
You're right.
and to
Yes.
think of Agatha Christie there, and perhaps she wrote the Murder on the Orient Express there. Perhaps some people say that's where she was when she disappeared for those days, just hiding out in the room. And of course, Ataturk is another one. There's a room dedicated to him, as you know. And then just a whole list of people we know of who have stayed in that hotel. And I think, when you go through those doors, you're entering that different world. You're entering a world that's exotic, that's romantic, that's historical, that fills you with excitement, I think, just going through those doors. And I think we have 4 nights there. To begin a
Yeah.
tour of Turkey at the Pera Palace, I think is a breathtaking way to begin. I think it's the perfect way to begin. So
Yeah, we've been fortunate to be able to secure the rooms there
yeah,
and
yeah.
start the tour there. I mean,
That's what, I don't know if people know the. Do you know the Netflix series Midnight at the Pera Palace?
no, I don't.
It's not a new series. It's a Turkish series that's on Netflix. And the thing about it is that a lot of the scenes are actually filmed in the Pera Palace, so
Oh,
that if people
fantastic.
wanted to look at that, they can get an idea of the interior of the Pera Palace. It's a kind, it's got a bit of historical stuff. It's a little bit to do with Ataturk, and it's a time traveling thing, but it does take you inside the hotel and show you some of those absolutely glorious interiors. So people might be interested to look at
No,
that.
that's a great tip. Yeah, I'll see if I don't have Netflix, but I'll see if I can
Well, I didn't have Netflix either. I got Netflix for 1 month in order to look at this, to see what the program was like.
But yeah, so starting off Istanbul, it's got a lot of history, a lot of different cultures that have been through there. Obviously, the Byzantine period and the Ottoman period, but I think most people have a background on that. But then we're moving on the tour, you've selected some specific places you want to visit that have Greco-Roman historical influence significance. So you've mentioned Troy. I mean, Troy obviously is
I think
is legendary.
For a classicist, you have to start at Troy, and that's certainly what I did back in the early 80s, Istanbul and then Troy, because Troy, in some ways, is perhaps the least impressive physically of the archaeological sites. But if you're a classicist, if you're a lover of Homer, and I am one of those people who think that nothing in world literature has ever equaled the Iliad. I have read the Iliad at least 50 times. Every time I read it, I'm more and more convinced that it's the greatest work. You know, and the Iliad, I think, is always very contemporary. It's not just about war, it's about human beings in a war zone and how that affects them. You know, it's about love and hate and betrayal and revenge and loyalty and all of those things. And at the very beginning, you know, Achilles is made to question, why is he there? Why is he fighting? And these questions, of course, are very, very important. And so he withdraws from fighting. I mean, he's faced with that. Why am I fighting? What am I doing here? What's it all about? And withdraws and only returns, you know, spirit of revenge and becomes a monster. But then at the very end, his humanity is restored by talking to the father of the man he killed. And he's learned so much about life. And I think, you know, I cry every time I read the last lines of the Iliad, but I think his adventure there and the restoration of his humanity is just very, very important. And some people say Troy is a place that's not just a physical city, but it's a city also in the imagination. And I think when you're at Troy, if you're not reading Homer, you're missing out on something. So certainly, when we go to Troy, we would be reading some of the great passages in Homer there, because it's a place where you feel Homer and you feel the Iliad, and the site itself is fascinating, and of course the whole story of of the finding of Troy and the excavation of Troy is also very, very romantic. The German entrepreneur, businessman Heinrich Schliemann, who has his own very, very romantic story, and he says that, you know, when he was a kid, he'd heard about Troy and decided that he had to go there, like I decided I had to go to Italy. And he also tells the story of how when he was, I think, 14, working in a shop, his family was poor, he heard a drunken miller recite lines of Homer in ancient Greek. He couldn't understand them, but he was enchanted by them, paid the miller to repeat them, and said, you know, one day I'm going to have the extreme happiness of learning ancient Greek. Well, he learned, I don't know, 15 different languages, a system of 6 weeks to learn a language. And then when he had amassed enough money through his business to go to Troy, to look for Troy, he learned ancient Greek. And of course, he went there, 1870s. He believed in the reality of Troy. He believed it was a real place. He believed in Homer. And when he went there, of course, after a couple of years, he found this great treasure, which he said was Priam's treasure. And I do have a wonderful story about that, because thousands of gold pieces. There's a famous photograph of his Greek wife, Sophie, wearing the great headdress, he says, of Helen. And the gold disappeared. It was taken to Germany. It disappeared in the Second World War, disappeared. And I was showing my students a documentary on this. And there the commentator is saying, you know, here was the gold. And then during the war, it disappeared. And he said, and nobody knows where it is. And one of my students put up her hand and said, "I think I know where it is." And it was the most wonderful, wonderful moment. And in fact, she did know where it was. Her father was an antique dealer in London and had been
Seriously.
approached by somebody who offered him some gold pieces. And he was very suspicious and did the research. And he tracked it down to Russia, which is where some years later it was revealed that the gold was in Russia. But I will never forget this student saying, "I think I know where it is."
Extraordinary.
It was just wonderful. But Troy is magical if you have Homer inside you. And I would like to, if people don't know Homer, I would like to bring Homer to them, because then the place does have that magic, and then it's a very evocative, powerful site that makes us think. I think it makes us reflect a bit on war and the nature of war.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of parallels we can draw from what you've been saying with what's going on in the world geopolitically at the moment as well.
And of course, I mean, we'll come back to Gallipoli, but of course, a lot of the soldiers, particularly the soldiers who went to Gallipoli, were very well educated. They knew their Homer, and they knew the association. I mean, they felt the association between Troy and themselves. So we can come back to that later on. That
Where
was
else
very
are we going on this tour? We got some other fantastic sites that we're visiting. Pergamon.
Pergamum. Well, I think, yeah, there are quite a few, as you say, Greco or Hellenistic Roman sites that we're visiting. They're all different. Everyone
Mm.
has some very distinctive characteristic, and Pergamum, of course, has several things that make it very special. Probably visually, the most dramatic thing about Pergamum is the great theatre, which is it's the steepest theatre in the world. I think it's an angle of something like 70 degrees. It's very, very, very steep. It's very dramatic, built into the hillside, and that yeah, that has to be one of the most impressive theatres anywhere in the world. Of course, Pergamum was also known for its great library, second only to the great library of Alexandria. And so it was very much an intellectual center. You build up a huge library. I think they estimate something like 200,000 scrolls written on the parchment, which Pergamene comes to be associated with parchment. They developed a parchment industry there. So it attracted scholars, it attracted intellectuals. It's this fantastic intellectual city with this enormous library. And so, although there's not, unfortunately, the library doesn't survive, one has the sense of this great intellectual center. We know that after the library at Alexandria was at least partially destroyed through Julius Caesar's invasion there, that Mark Antony was supposed to have given a lot of the library to Cleopatra to replace some of the lost works in Alexandria, that subsequently Augustus gave some of the books back. But I think the library, the notion of the library is very important for understanding Pergamum. Then there's also the great altar, and unfortunately, one only sees the base of the altar there. That's the sculptures, great sculptures, are in Germany, in Berlin. But that was a very remarkable work, a huge monumental altar with a long, long frieze, over 100 meters long frieze in very high relief, almost freestanding sculptures, the battles of the gods and the giants. Of course, that introduces us to this whole issue of whether places should return great works of art, which I know is very controversial. Of course, the Turks would like the Pergamum altar back. But the other great thing about Pergamum, which is less known, perhaps it's more known now, is that it was also a great healing site. There's the main site, and then across is the Asclepion, Asclepius being a god of medicine. And I know when I have been there, most tourists go to the main site, and a lot of them just don't go to the Asclepion. But the Asclepion, the whole medical healing center, I think, is absolutely fascinating. And Galen, the great second century doctor, surgeon, physician, writer, comes from Pergamum. He studied there. He studied in Alexandria, which had a famous medical school. He came to Rome. He became the physician of some of the Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, Septimius Severus. Went back to Pergamum, became the surgeon for a gladiator school there. But it's the sort of buildings there, and it's also the approach to medicine that we learn there, which was not just physical, it was also psychological. um, Massages, diet, health, exercise, entertainment. There's a theater there as well. Those sorts of things. Also, the dream therapy.
Okay, wow.
People were There were cubicles there. People would sleep in there, and then they would talk about their dreams. So there's a dream therapy going on there. We know a lot about that because an orator from the second century who was sick for a lot of his life, spent quite a bit of time there and did a lot of the dream therapy and wrote about it in a book which survives. So the idea of the dream therapy is very, very interesting. It That sounds good. There was also snake therapy, which sounds less
Oh,
interesting.
not sure
But
we're so
snakes were
keen on
a symbol
that.
of yeah, they were a symbol of regeneration, of course, because
Mm.
they're kind of reborn after each winter. So I think they had non-venomous snakes going around, but I think they were also used at Epidaurus in Greece as a therapy.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
But,
so I think the whole Asclepian has a very interesting offers a very interesting dimension to Pergamon, the nature of medicine, the center of medicine, the approach to medicine. I think is very, very interesting.
yeah, and I don't think people sort of realize the importance of these places in history and what's
Oh
behind them.
yes. Yeah, and I mean, Galen was enormously important. He wrote prolifically. I mean, some people estimate he wrote something like 5,000 treatises on
Wow.
medicine and other things. He studied anatomy. I mean, and I think his work was very, very influential for hundreds of years. So he's one of the local boys of Pergamum and certainly a very, very important figure.
Hmm, interesting.
So there's a lot to see at Pergamum.
Yes, you've just sort of filled up 3 days for me. And some other places we go to, Assos.
Assos. Well, I put Assos on because I have a couple of reasons for liking Assos very, very much. One of them is, again, its location. It is just absolutely
Mhm.
spectacularly located. The Acropolis is on a hill. It's from the great temple of Athena there at Assos, which is itself a very interesting temple. It's a unique temple. It moves away from traditional temples in that area, which I'll get back to. But from there, you look out over the site and through to this absolutely turquoise sea of the Aegean, and it is absolutely glorious. It's just very, very, very beautiful. But it was also one of the reasons that I particularly like it is it was the home of Aristotle for 3 years. That it was, like many of these cities, a Hellenistic city before it was Roman, and he had been invited by the king of Assos to come, along with other philosophers, to come to Assos and set up a school of philosophy there. The king actually had studied at Plato's Academy in Athens and been a fellow student with Aristotle. And he had decided that he wanted to make that another great intellectual center. So he invited Aristotle and some of the other philosophers, his classmates, I suppose you'd say, to Assos to set up a school of philosophy there. So Aristotle went to Assos. He married the niece or daughter of the king, and he spent about 3 years there. And he wrote some of his works there. That was when he started scientific investigation. I mean, Aristotle was interested in absolutely everything. Um, and he started working on classifying animals and plants. He started probably working on the politics. So I think it's wonderful to be there in this absolutely glorious location, perhaps sitting at the steps of the Temple of Athena, looking out over this breathtaking view over the Aegean Sea, and thinking of Aristotle there with his extraordinary mind. I
Yeah.
started thinking about trees or fish or something like
Well, it
that.
brings it to life, doesn't it? Being in situ,
Oh,
being there
absolutely,
where
absolutely.
history was happening is just, yeah,
Absolutely,
something
you have to, I
extraordinary.
mean, these places aren't, they shouldn't be dead. They should be filled with people. And of course, all of these places we'll be visiting have wonderful people. You bring the people into the place and you get a real feeling for them. Aristotle, he left after 3 years and went to Lesbos and then went back to, then he went off, of course, to be the tutor to Alexander the Great, which is pretty important. And then he founded his own school, the Lyceum, which is something that I did. I founded a Lyceum here at my school in
Oh,
Rome,
fantastic.
which was based on Aristotle's principles of this, wide observation of the world, the intellectual curiosity that I think is very important. But I love to be in Assos and just sit and contemplate Aristotle, his life there. So it combines those things. It's a beautiful, beautiful site, and it has that whole wonderful history of Aristotle there. So it's a lovely place.
And there's somewhere that you've put, another place you specifically put on the itinerary, which is nicer.
Yes, well, I put that on. One, I think for me, it's perhaps the most romantic site. Um, and also it's very much unknown. I came across Nisa when I was taking a group to Eastern Turkey many years ago, and our local guide had understood within a few days that the group was interested in pursuing all kinds of things, and it wasn't on our itinerary. And she said to me, I think your group would really enjoy going to this site. She said, I haven't been there for a long time, but it's not far from the road. And so we went, and it was a real sense of discovery. It was very beautiful. The spring flowers were out, as they will be when we're there, which makes it
Mm.
look very beautiful. It looked semi-abandoned, but again, Nisa had been a great intellectual city. It had a library as well, in a very important library, perhaps on the scale of things from the Library of Pergamon, perhaps very important after that. And it had a lot of intellectuals come and study there. Strabo, the great geographer, went to Nisa to study there using all of the facilities of the library. And I think the library may be the second best preserved library in Asia Minor after the Great Library of Celsus at Ephesus. So the library is there. There was also a great theatre there, which is well preserved, and the theatre, of course, is associated with Dionysus. And
Mm.
Dionysus, there's a legend that he was actually born in Nisa, and the reliefs that went around the theatre are reliefs showing the life of Dionysus, and many of those are there on site. So I think when you go to Nisa, you're going off the beaten track, but you're going to a site that again is very, very rich in history, that again is a very, very beautiful site to be in. And it gives you that sense of discovery because most people don't know about it. And there's quite a lot of architectural remains there and a lot of history there. It's a special place, and for me, I think it's a very, very romantic place. It looks very romantic with the growth, the flowers, the ruins. It's very, very beautiful. So I'm happy that we're going there. Yes, I put it on because I thought that's something different. Perhaps it's something that people don't know about, and I hope they will have that sense of discovery too.
I'm sure they'll find it equally as wonderful as you do, and it's great you can impart your own passions to people. People love, receiving that
Yeah.
uh, information and that feeling through our tour leaders and through people like yourselves who can really bring it to life. So that's fantastic, and it's really good to have somewhere unusual on the itinerary like that you projected into the tour. So that's fantastic for us, and I know people will love it. Lots of moving on sort of from the Greco-Roman side, ancient world, we're Cappadocia, more into the natural world, but we've got underground churches, we've got Byzantine, Ottoman, we've got Christian history there. So we're spending a few days there. We've got some wonderful natural region with the Great Fairy Chimneys, but I think we'll be delving into a lot of the underground, the sort of the Christian. They were persecuted, weren't they?
Well, there's a lot going on there. They were persecuted sometimes, not always, of course. So in Cappadocia, yes, it's a very rich history going all the way through, and of course, it is the natural landscape there. I think you will be visiting a lot of UNESCO sites. What's unusual about Cappadocia is that it's a double UNESCO site. It's double because it has UNESCO recognition for the natural landscape, as well as for the cultural landscape, if you like. So the thing about, I mean, it just knocks you out. I mean, when you approach Cappadocia, it's the visual. It's just this landscape that is so extraordinary, that is so outside your experience, breathtakingly beautiful. Colors, pinks, grays, creams. It's just another world, and it literally is jaw-dropping. I don't think you can ever tire of, even if you're there 3 or 4 days or a week, I don't think you can ever tire of looking at this extraordinary landscape that's been formed over millions and millions and millions of years. That, of course, it was occupied forever, but it becomes interesting, particularly interesting, I think, in the 4th century, when there's a strong Christian community there, and the rock that is there is a soft rock. It's a soft tufa, volcanic rock, and so people could carve into it very easily. And there were, from even I think early Hittite times, there were things carved in there. But the early Christians then, from the 4th century through, carved not only their homes into the rock, but also their churches. So there are hundreds and hundreds of rock-cut churches in the area, in the whole area there. And then they started painting inside the churches. So you get these wonderful Byzantine frescoes inside the churches, frescoes depicting the Old Testament, the New Testament, the saints, local donors. So I think it's probably the greatest concentration of Byzantine art anywhere, just all in this one place. So you can go through from the 4th century through to look at these great Byzantine frescoes inside these unique rock-cut churches. So again, you've got layers and layers and layers of history going on there. We'll also go to one of the underground cities, and when I went to that area in the early 80s, I think there was one very primitive rock cut place to stay in Gourmet when I went there. Very primitive, very basic. Now, of course, Gourmet is hotel, restaurant, hotel, restaurant, hotel, restaurant, hotel, restaurant. It is an area that has been developed enormously for tourism, and that has brought certain problems to the area too, which is something that interests me, and I would like to talk about those issues also. What happens to a place like Cappadocia when you get mass tourism coming in? I think then there were 2 underground cities that were known. Now they're discovering more and more and more underground cities, and they were refuges for all kinds of people, for the Christians at certain times, but they were refuge against the Mongols, against later on the Greeks stayed there against the Turks. I mean, places of refuge. It seems, although scholars keep changing their minds about the purpose of them, that they were temporary. They weren't to be lived in. They were places that you would go to in order to escape from whoever was persecuting you. They are, the one we'll go to, I think, is 8 levels down. Tourists have access to the first 4 levels. You don't want to go down if you suffer from claustrophobia, but um, but they are fascinating, and they do tell a whole history of, not sure you'd say persecution, but of refuge from different groups over the centuries. And then, of course, perhaps the last one with the Greeks. And as you know, after the First World War, the great national spirit that arose through Ataturk and the young Turks in Turkey had that very negative effect of wanting to throw out anybody who wasn't Turkish. And there were major massacres of Greeks throughout the area. The Greeks, of course, had been in Asia Minor for thousands of years. I mean, they'd been there very early on. They've been very famous Greeks. Homer was from Asia Minor, through to the Hellenistic, through all the way through. So there were always Greeks there. But up to 700,000 Greeks were massacred in Turkey, and then some people even say up to 1 million massacred in Turkey. Then there was the treaty in 1924, I think, the Treaty of Lausanne, which had the population exchange. So at that point, the Greeks in Cappadocia and in other areas, as we'll see, were forced to go back, or to go to Greece, a place which they had never known, they had never lived in, and Turks in Greece had to come to Turkey. So with the population exchange in 1924, the Greeks from Cappadocia left that area, and that was sort of the end of them. So the history, it goes all the way through, well, from pre-Christian, but certainly Christians from the 4th century through to the Greeks in the early 20th century.
So we visit Mustafa Pasha.
Mustafa Pasha, I think, is a very important village to go to. It's in that area. It was an almost exclusively Greek village. It was a very wealthy village. There were Greek merchants there who really made a lot of money, and they demonstrated that through building these beautiful, beautiful mansions with exquisite stone carving on them. And there are now probably about 30 of those mansions which are visible. But yes, I say a Greek village. And then in 1924, they were forced to leave. It's a forced transfer to go to an area in Greece, and it's quite heartbreaking, really. The village still has a very Greek feeling to it. You have these wonderful Greek mansions there, and we will have lunch in this wonderful Greek house, which I have been to. It's a beautiful house. It's Greek. There's also a small museum there that was set up by the descendant of one of the Turks who had been forced to come to Turkey, and she set up a small museum there about the forced transfer, and that's very interesting to see. There's and she's a lovely person who wants to engage with people and tell something about the story. She wrote a book about it, which is to do with what she calls the tragedy of the population exchange. And I think I read, and I think it happened in other parts of Turkey, that some people, they'd lived there forever. Some tried to disguise themselves as Turks, and there was a woman in Mustafa Pasha who disguised herself as a Turk, said she was a Turk, and she stayed on. I think she died fairly recently, at a very old age. But people didn't want to leave, and those stories are it's It's a very beautiful village. It has a very, very interesting and different history. There's a church there that is dedicated to Constantine Helen, I think, which of course is abandoned, but you can go into it. So it gives us, I think, what's a very important dimension to our understanding of Turkey, and that is the Greeks who lived there, as far as we know, reasonably well with the Turks. They were integrated, and then what happened at the beginning of the 20th century with the Turkish nationalism. So it offers a very important view of one aspect of Turkish history. So I'm very pleased we're going there. I think the history is very, very important. It's very interesting. One could say it's very topical as well.
Yes.
And the village itself is very beautiful. So it combines all those things.
Oh, that sounds great. And you sort of
And there are some rock cut churches nearby as well.
and some wonderful nature, and we'll do a walk in the Ilara Valley for one of the days that during our time there, and we'll get to see the wonderful natural aspects of it and the flowers as you mentioned.
Yes,
but
yes,
coming back to that nationalism at Ataturk, which I know the Australians will know very well from Gallipoli, and of course we go to Çanakkale and spend a day in Gallipoli.
Yes.
You have some sort of personal connections there.
Well, I do, in fact. I think the first time I went to Gallipoli, which of course is on every Australian's
Yes.
itinerary, I think the very first tomb I saw had my name on it. It had H. on it. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a bit shocking. I don't know who that person was, but my grandfather fought at Gallipoli. He was a colonel. He led 60th Battalion, and he arrived on the 25th of April in 1915, and he captured a very strategic hill there, which is named after him. So it is called Pope's Hill, and I have climbed through the brambles and everything to visit Pope's Hill. But of course, Gallipoli is one of the most moving sites you could possibly see. It's huge. I mean, I don't think I had any idea when I first went there how absolutely huge it is. It's very beautiful. It's desolate. It's very plain. You've probably been there, you know this, but there's a sense of desolation. There is a sense of tragedy that is there. Miles and miles, kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of trenches, and then of course lots and lots and lots of cemeteries. And of course the cemeteries are there for the Commonwealth, for the French, and also for the Turks. I mean, goodness, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of Turks who died there, as well as Australians and New Zealanders and others. And there is that very beautiful, very moving saying of Ataturk, which is written up there, which is telling the mothers of those foreign soldiers not to weep, that they have been taken into the bosom of Turkey there. It's a very moving thing to read there. But it's profoundly moving, I think, Gallipoli. And I think it's been done very beautifully, just in its simplicity, absolute simplicity. It just does evoke so strongly what happened there. And it evokes the tragedy, I think, more than anything else, of what happened there. And I think people are inevitably moved by it. It's of course fundamental in Australian history, fundamental in Turkish history. But again, like being at Troy, we have to think what was it all about. And I think it's very moving to read some of the works of the soldiers who went there. There's a famous poem by a British soldier, Patrick Shaw Stewart, who asks Achilles to fight for him in the trenches. And he says at one point in the poem, Achilles, you knew how to die, you knew that. It's something that I have to learn. But I would also like to read some of the poetry at Gallipoli, because there's some very moving, again, very simple but very, very moving poetry that links the past with the present. And I don't think you can be in Gallipoli without being extremely moved by
Mm,
it.
mm.
Um, my grandfather survived. The hill is named after him. There was a cemetery also named after him, which is now affiliated with another cemetery there. But he survived and went on to fight more. But it's a remarkable place.
Yeah, I think a great many of us obviously will have connections there. My grandfather
Yes,
fought there too. He arrived on
yes,
that same day, so he may well have known your grandfather.
yes, yes, yes. Yeah,
And
that's
again, he
very
was
interesting.
fortunate enough to survive, and I'm here because of that,
Yes,
thankfully.
yes, yeah, yeah.
um, it's sort of a great way to sort of end the tour. We head back to Istanbul for a night at the end, of course, for convenience. But
Hmm.
moving on from just what we see on the actual tour, I mean, Turkey itself has such a rich culture, the traditions, the arts and crafts,
Hmm.
the ubiquitous carpet shop,
Yes.
some great things that people will see, and trinkets and things they might be able to pick up along the way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you,
Well, the carpets are absolutely wonderful. As you know, I've just come back from Turkey, and I can't remember exactly where it was. This was in the east of Turkey, but I was taken to a carpet shop there, and I absolutely fell in love with three carpets, which are very, very special carpets. They're not Turkish carpets; they're Persian carpets, and they're very difficult to find. And I literally fell to my knees when I saw the first one there. I fell to my knees on the carpet. It was so beautiful. There are beautiful, beautiful carpets in Turkey. And of course, we'll be going to Avanos in Cappadocia, which is famous for its ceramics. There's some
yes,
beautiful ceramics also, and the museum we'll go to there is quite extraordinary as well. So people, if they want to buy things, there'll certainly be wonderful things to buy, the most famous being the carpets and the ceramics. So there's some souvenir shopping to be done.
no shortage of shopkeepers willing to sell their goods either.
Yes, yes. Perhaps Istanbul, perhaps the Great Bazaar is not the right place. I'm
No,
not sure about that, but there will certainly be places where there will be a plethora of wonderful things to buy.
yeah, I think, I mean, it's not quite on the same track, but one of my favorite places in Istanbul was the Spice Bazaar.
Yes,
They've
yes,
got,
of course, it's lovely. The Spice Bazaar is very special. Very,
um,
very.
and of course the food in Turkey is well known.
The food in Turkey is fabulous. It is absolutely fabulous. Yes, I just had 2 weeks in Turkey, and I'd say every single meal was absolutely delicious. And it suits vegetarians as well as meat eaters, I think. I mean, you can get a
Mm,
lot of wonderful vegetarian dishes. So, um, yeah, food is good. Food is very, very good in Turkey.
yeah, no, I'm sure we've got some nice restaurants picked out along the way
I have no doubt about
to
that.
have some meals at.
Very, very indeed. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm conscious that we've sort of been chatting for almost an hour, and yeah, it's been wonderful to talk through your obvious love for the area and your region and your passion. Um,
Well, it's a joy to talk about places that you love.
of course, and it just comes so naturally. It's been wonderful, and I'm sure everyone listening in's been able to feel that and get a sense of that, and I'm sure you're looking forward to the tour in March, and
I'm looking forward to it enormously because I think it's a great itinerary, and I think they're just wonderful places to see. There is wonderful food to eat, and the weather should be perfect. And I would just say that April, of course, is the tulip
right.
season in Turkey, and if people want to stay on a couple of days in Istanbul at the end, there are something like 20 million tulips at that time. And I went to the greatest park in Istanbul in April a couple of years ago, and it just colored tulips everywhere you could see. It was spectacular. So if people want to stay on a couple of days at the end to see the tulips, I highly recommend that. It'll be a great tour, wonderful things to see. And if you can finish off with this display, this miraculous display of millions of tulips, then go
And
for it.
it goes all month, it goes right throughout April, I read.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know how long tulips last.
Maybe
You have to be there at the right time. I was there at exactly the right time. It was in April. Yeah, it lasts for the month, but I don't know if the tulips are at their height all month. I don't know the life of a tulip.
I guess it depends on the weather, and we can't predict that these days, and climate change. But yeah,
Yes,
wonderful
yes,
way to end if people do want to stay on a bit longer, and there's so much more to
yeah,
see than we
yeah.
can fit into the tour itself in Istanbul anyway. So yeah, certainly recommend that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But it's been lovely to talk to you. I always enjoy chatting to you. I learn so much, and you just have such enthusiasm. It's great.
well, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Mark. It's a pleasure indeed.
Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to continuing to work with you, and perhaps developing that Eastern Turkey tour into some different regions in the future that you've mentioned. So
Yes,
we might see
yes.
about that in the future. But also thank you to everyone for joining us today. This has been recorded, so if you wanted to listen back to any of it, you will be sent the link, and you can come back and revisit our wonderful chat today with Helen Pope. Thank you very much.